Hey, welcome everybody. It's been a while since we've seen you. Our last show is in July. It's now October. We didn't really mean for that to happen, but 2020, right? Here we are. So we're glad to be back with another great show for you tonight. Thank you for tuning in. I know you're all very excited to watch the two old white guys yell at each other a little later tonight. I'm not going to do that. I hope you don't do that. But if you are going to do that, at least you got to watch this first. So, what is this show? If you've never seen us before, this is Awkward Teenage Years. This is a storytelling show. We're going to have 5 brave souls bearing their souls tonight for you, telling you stories about first crushes, getting into trouble, getting out of trouble, experimenting with drugs and alcohol, going to school, like all of the teenage stuff. That's why we call it Awkward Teenage Years. And we're super excited for our storytellers. I'm going to give you a quick little preview of everybody here. Everybody wave hello. These are all of our storytellers. All right. And we'll get back to them very shortly. So I'm going to jump right into it. First up, we've got a new friend of mine. I just met her recently in a storytelling class with Adam Wade, who's the common denominator in so many of our storytelling lives. She is a 2-time Moth Story Slam winner. Actually, she's been crushing it at these recent virtual story slams. She's the host of Heroes of New York, a podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcasts. And she's also a mom to a 9-year-old. So please welcome to our virtual stage, my friend, Anu Senan.
Thank you, Will. My family loves drama, and most times they create it. When I was growing up, we would go to the movies almost every week. My parents loved movies, and sometimes we'd even go twice a week. They also loved good food, so we would go to every single restaurant in the neighborhood. But that's where my dad's love for spending money ended. He was really stingy. I grew up in Muscat, which is a small town in a country called Oman in the Middle East. It's bordered by the Arabian Sea. I was 15 when this incident happened. My mom loaned some money to a friend, but she never told my dad. And when he found out, through a chance conversation with her, it slipped out of her mouth, he was furious. He would never loan money to anyone. So to him, this was a sign of an affair. My mom was shocked. She begged and she pleaded. She's an Indian woman, and this would hurt her reputation and her dignity. But my dad didn't listen. And he did the strangest thing. The next day, when he left for work, he locked the door behind her. Now, I would go to school every day. Dad would drop me, he would pick me. So I had some semblance of a normal life. I would meet my friends. I was like any other normal teenager at 15. I loved the Backstreet Boys and the Spice Girls. I had crushes. But I wouldn't tell anyone at school what was going on at home. It was way too embarrassing. And to me, we were a weird family. But I don't know how my mom endured it. I mean, the neighbors were all locals and they spoke Arabic. So we pretty much kept to ourselves. My mom's family was in India, and this was way back in 1999. So the only way she could communicate with them was through letters. There was no internet, no mobile phones. So when dad wasn't home, she would call up one distant uncle she had in town. He would come outside our house, and mom would drop the letters she had written for her family. He would pick them up and post it for her. This was her life. One day, I came home and found her in tears. Apparently, out of sheer boredom and frustration and loneliness, she picked up the land phone to call a friend. Now, she had been putting it off for the longest period because she didn't want to tell them what was going on. As Indian families, we usually keep things private. She calls up this friend only to find out they knew what was going on. My dad told them. She was upset. Her reputation had been damaged. She was inconsolable, and I didn't know what to do. I was at a loss. I mean, I couldn't stand up to my dad. He had a temper. Now, dad loved me, but there was no way on earth I was going to stand up to him. So I thought for a while, and I did the only thing I knew. I turned on MTV and I listened to music. And as I sat there listening to music, I noticed a letter lying on the coffee table. It was addressed to my dad. So I picked it up. It was from the Indian club where all the Indians went to socialize. The letter said that the next week they were hosting a special event to celebrate this great Indian actor who was visiting. His name was Srini. And I was super excited because I love Srini and his movies and I wanted to go. But my mom hasn't gone anywhere in months and I wasn't going without her. So I went to my mom and I said, Mom, can we please go? And I could see her face was torn with emotions. On one hand, she really wanted to see Srini because she liked him too. But on the other hand, she wasn't quite sure if she wanted to face all these people, especially since they knew about her story. But finally, she relented and she said, Ask your dad. So I went up to my dad and I said, Dad, can we please come with you? And my dad thought about it for a while and he said, Okay, what's the harm? We're going to be with him, right? So on the night of the event, Mom and I got dressed up and we stepped out and went to this venue with our dad, with my dad. And this is the first time we're going out in a long time. We got there, the place is crowded with people. We can see our friends there, and we don't want to talk to them. So Mom and I find a spot in the corner, Dad standing near the exit, and our friends are sitting a few rows behind us. The lights dim. Srini gets up to speak and he entertains the audience. He tells us about a time from his previous life that inspired him for his biggest movie. Srini talks about his neighbors, a couple who lived next door. He moves out of there. One day he runs into the husband on the street, and the husband says, Srini, there was a time in my life when I suspected my wife. I used to lock her every time I left the house. As Srini said this, the audience erupted into laughter. I was speechless. I wanted to beat myself up for bringing my mom there. My mom was shocked. I knew the friends behind us were laughing. I'm not sure if they were laughing at us or at Srini's joke. I couldn't see my dad, so I turned sideways to look at him, and he was looking straight at the stage, no expression at all. When the event was over and the lights came back on, we left the place as quickly as we could, and we drove home in stunned silence. The next day, when dad went to work, he left the door unlocked, and he never locked it since. Thank you.
Very nice.
Wow.
I've heard that story a couple times. It gets better every time.
Thank you, Will.
There's lockdown, right? That we're all in right now, but like then there's lockdown. Like I like you titled this story "The Lockdown," I think, in the pitch that you sent us before, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm totally able to appreciate what you went through, minus technology at the time.
Yeah, incredible. Is there anything that you would like to plug? You want to tell us some more about your podcast, perhaps?
Oh, yes. I started Heroes of New York at the beginning of the lockdown in New York City. I saw a lot of people in my neighborhood who were jobless, whose spouses lost their jobs, whose kids couldn't go to college, and yet they were helping other people in need. And I thought that these stories need to be broadcast to a larger audience because people need some hope and some strength right now. And that's how I started it. And a lot of people started coming forward and offering their stories and telling me about other people who are doing great things in New York City. So I'm very happy and honored to be able to do that.
That's awesome. That's great.
And that's on all the major podcast platforms, right?
It is. It's on Google, Apple, Spotify. I quite can't remember the list off the top of my head. It's right there.
Anywhere where you get your podcasts,
Right.
you can find
Right.
it. Heroes of New York. All right.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Thanks for being on our show.
Thank you.
All right. We'll keep this show moving right along here, folks. Our next storyteller is my co-producer, co-creator, partner in crime here at Awkward Teenage Years. If you saw our original show, you might know him as Barf. Otherwise, you know him as Grant Bowen. He's an actor, writer, and storyteller. He's been seen telling stories at the Moth, at the Magnet Theater. He's done a solo show at the Pit. And he wants to remind you that early voting in New York begins this Saturday, and to get your absentee ballots in as soon as possible. So please give a warm digital welcome to my buddy Grant Bowen.
Hey, Will. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. So I discovered theater when I was a kid. And when I started, it was like more of a hobby, but it grew into a bit more of an addiction. I started doing more plays like at school, at church, at community theater. I would find new plays to read. I would look up musicals and like learn all the like songs and trivia facts and everything. And as I got older and older, it gradually escalated until by high school, I was cranking Rent in my car and singing Les Mis at the top of my lungs. I had turned into that theater kid, just singing and dancing and wondering why the girls won't call. But my sophomore year, as I've talked about twice on this show already, the spring musical was Grease. And I was lucky enough to get cast in the lead role of Danny Zuko. And don't get me wrong, this was as cheap as a high school musical gets. Like all our clothes were from Goodwill, our music was set to karaoke tracks, but I was still really excited because this was the first time ever I had gotten the lead role in anything. Like everybody knows Grease, everyone knows Danny, like that character's front and center. And to top it off, I had just quit the wrestling team a few months before so that I could dedicate more time to doing the school plays. So I felt like I really had to step up and prove myself. So I dove in, and I dove in hard. I learned all the songs. I memorized my lines. I memorized other people's lines. I made sure I ate, slept, and breathed Grease. Now, me and the rest of the cast, we were a really tight-knit group. It's because we were an interesting mix of kids. Some of us were the theater kids, you know, the drama geeks. We were really passionate about this stuff. And then the others weren't theater kids, but they were like, well, I like singing. I like Grease. This could be fun. And so we really kind of got to bridge worlds in that way and get to know each other more. One of the non-theater kids who joined was a guy named Chip. Chip was a great guy, you know, tall, handsome, super friendly. He was on the soccer team, but he was also in choir with me. And even though he wasn't much of an actor, he could really sing. And that's how he ended up in the role of the teen angel. Now, for anyone who doesn't like remember or doesn't really know Grease, the teen angel's like a small but showy role. You know, Frankie Avalon played him in the movie. The character Frenchie goes to beauty school. She flunks out. She feels lost. She says, I wish I had one of those guardian angels who shows up and tells you what to do. And then, out of nowhere, this gorgeous crooning teen angel with a bevy of backup singers shows up, sings a song called Beauty School Dropout, and tells her to go back to high school and get her degree. And then that's it. The one song, and then you never see that character again. So Chip was like, oh, this is easy. It's just, I only have to worry about the one song, and then I just get to hang out in the back the rest of the time. Like, this is going to be fun. And it was fun for a while. And then we ran into the problem that we always ran into with the school plays, which was our director, Mrs. M, the drama teacher. Mrs. M didn't have a great reputation at our school. She was known for being condescending and kind of a smartass and really kind of impatient and snippy with people. And whenever we were working on the show, these qualities got worse and worse the closer we got to opening night because she became more stressed. I didn't like it, but I put up with it because I really wanted to be in the plays. Chip was not having it. Like there was some very real like tension between them. Like these two were about to butt heads. And as Chip's luck would have it, there ended up being a conflict with the soccer season and the run of the show. So Chip saw his window. He was like, screw this, I'm out. Sing the damn song yourself. And he left. This was 2.5 weeks into a 4-week rehearsal process. And suddenly here we were with no teen angel. And you can't just do Grease without doing Beauty School Dropout. Like, people are expecting it. You can't just skip it. Like, our own parents would probably walk out if we weren't going to do that song. And so the rest of the cast was like, well, what are we going to do about this? So the next rehearsal, Mrs. M finds me and pulls me aside and says, look, Chip is no longer with the show. We don't have time to find anyone else. And I know you're the only other person in the cast who knows the song. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And she's like, I've watched you sing it to yourself off to the side during rehearsals. Grant, you know all the songs. Look, I know I'm already putting you through enough as it is playing Danny, but it would really help us out if you could also play the teen angel. Now, I hear this and part of my brain thinks this sounds insane for several reasons. First of all, she was right. Like, I was busy trying to learn my lines and all of my blocking as Danny. Like, I was under a lot of stress as it was. And on top of that, Danny is in the scene right before Beauty School Dropout. Like, he's on stage for a bit of dialogue, he leaves, and then it's like a minute and a half before the teen angel comes on. That's like a minuscule amount of time for me to leave, change costumes, then come back on as a totally different character. Here I am trying to prove myself, and if anything went wrong with this, I would look like a fool. Also, why is Frenchie having a sexy angel fantasy about her platonic friend Danny when everyone knows she's supposed to end up with Duty by the end of the show? It doesn't make any sense. All of this is swirling around in my head. And suddenly there's this other part of my mind. And it kind of cuts through the rest of those thoughts and jumps to the front. And before I can think about it too much, I say yes. Yes, I'll do it. And so it's settled. We go back to rehearsals, we work me into the number, and we try to figure out how we're going to pull off this crazy transition. So, cut to opening night. We get to Act 2. Get to the Beauty School Dropout scene. I'm on stage as Danny. All right, see you later, guys. Those aren't the lines, but you get it. Anyway, I walk off stage, kind of slowly strolling, and then I'm ripping my tennis shoes off. I'm pulling on these white pants over the pants I'm already wearing. I throw on this white jacket and I'm snapping the buttons, and I look and the buttons aren't aligned, so I have to unsnap them and then snap them back up. And I'm trying not to make too much noise so that the audience doesn't hear me. And I'm cramming my feet into these white shoes. I hear Frenchie say, I wish I had one of those guardian angels. And the music starts. I'm set. I rush out onto stage. And as soon as I hit those stage lights, I undergo this total transformation. Like, all my stress is just thrown off. And I go full Frankie Avalon. Like, I'm walking with a swagger and all the backup singers come on. And I'm like flirting with Frenchie. I'm flirting with the backup singers. I'm flirting with the audience. I'm singing the song and I'm nailing all the notes. And I own that stage. And the song ends. I walk off stage and there's this burst of applause. Like, everyone's loving it. They're eating it up. No one's questioning why the same kid just came on again. And as I'm backstage hearing this, I feel this wave of adrenaline come over me, but also this burst of pride. Like, pride in what I'd just done. In fact, I was more proud of what I'd done in that one scene than of anything else I did in the entire show. And as we got to the end of the night and the cast took our final bow for the crowd, I had this thought, maybe this is more than just a hobby. Thank you.
Great job, Grant.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very nice.
This
Love
is like
that high school theater story.
this is like the third part of a trilogy of Grease stories I've told on this show. So
Yeah,
I'm just,
you do a solo show about
I was
it.
going to say, maybe I'm working on a cabaret act where
Yeah. I could throw in some of the numbers from Grease in between the stories.
yeah, there we
you know?
go. Just some Grease and then like the behind the scenes drama. Like, perfect.
Yeah. I like that the story ends with a win. You know, a lot of the stories that we tell don't always end on a high note, you know, or have a lot of high notes in them.
We really don't get a lot of happy endings on this show.
Pepper some of those in there sometimes, right? So
Yeah, for this to be as lighthearted as it is, we a lot of stories end on a downer. It's like,
all right. Grant, do you want to tell the people about the little PSA that we like to do here.
Sure, I'm ready if you are.
All right.
All right, so this is the moment we like to call our PSA moment of the show. We do this every week because there's two organizations that we really want to encourage people to donate money to. First of all, we want to talk about Frigid New York. They are a theater company here in downtown Manhattan. Every year they hold the Frigid Fest, which is where we did this show for the first time. If it wasn't for Frigid, we wouldn't have gotten together and we wouldn't be here tonight. Of course, like every theater right now, they're struggling. If you want to find out more about them, go to frigid.nyc, or you can follow them at Frigid New York on all of their social media. And right now they have a Patreon campaign that you can donate to make like recurring monthly contributions to. And they've got a lot of really great, fun, cool rewards programs on there. Like I'm I'm on their Patreon, Will's on their Patreon. Like we highly endorse it. So please check them out, help them keep the doors open during this time. Also, we want to tell you about the Magnet Theater. Magnet Theater is one of the top improv schools and theaters here in New York. They're one of the only improv schools that offer classes in storytelling. Like that's how Will and I met. If it weren't for Frigid, we wouldn't have done Awkward Teenage Years. If it weren't for Magnet, none of us would be storytellers. So if you like what you're seeing tonight, go check out the Magnet Theater, check out their improv shows and all the other shows they're doing. They have their own Twitch channel at twitch.tv/the Magnet Theater. You can also follow them at Magnet Theater on all of their social media. And if you want to donate to them, you can buy tickets to their virtual shows. Just go to magnettheater.com and click on the virtual shows banner. Trust me, they would really, really appreciate your help right now. Give if you can, and thanks for tuning in tonight. Yes.
I don't want to brag, but I'm going to brag a little bit. I got one of these limited edition Magnet Theater masks. If you sign up for their mailing list, maybe when they do another printing, you can get one of your own. I don't know. All right, so let's keep this show moving right along. Our next storyteller for you, he is the co-creator / co-producer of a great show called Unreeling Storytelling, a show that I had the privilege to be a part of back in, I don't know, was that June, July, when we did that 24-hour storytelling festival. I appeared with this next guy on that show as he was the host. He wants to tell you that storytelling has changed his life in a way that he never would have imagined. He's so thankful for this community and the healing that happens here. It's my pleasure to welcome to our digital stage, Mr. Jason Fulford.
Thank you. So Brooklyn, New York, downtown Brooklyn to be exact, 1997. I'm 16 years old, having a really tricky summer. The summer's coming to an end. A lot of things that, have happened in high school. I've already been to 2 different high schools, Severian and Berkeley Carroll at the time, both located in Brooklyn. And I'm excited because the next school year is starting and my parents give me some money so I could go school shopping. And that was one of like the biggest days, of the year as a kid in high school, especially myself. I was a basketball player my whole life. So, I definitely wanted to get a pair of Jordans, which was like the big thing if you were a basketball player, to have a pair of those and just kind of try to be like Mike, I guess. And I'm about to meet up with one of my friends that I actually played a lot of basketball with growing up. And we're both 16, same age. And it's funny because basketball was like the biggest part of our life, I would say probably from 9 years old to 15, because things get a little different when you get in high school, started smoking a little weed. And just, first girlfriends, first heartbreaks, a lot of things that just happen. And I feel like New York City was very unique in the 80s and 90s. It's like, if you survived high school, like you accomplished something. And so I'm going to meet him, my friend Chris. He was my backcourt mate for a while. We played all over the city. And we meet up we're about to get on the train to go to East Broadway. And I'm excited because I have like these few stores in the city that I always like to go to. And there's one store named David Z's that I was like, all right, Chris, we're going to David Z's. I'm going to get these sneakers. And, let's see if I have some money left over and we'll figure out what to do. So we're walking, and my parents grew up in Gowanus. Chris grew up in Gowanus. So we knew a lot of the same people. So we're walking, and we see an older guy that we know, and he's actually smoking some weed at the time. And we stop, kind of engage in a brief conversation. He walks off, and all of a sudden, we're cornered by 3 cop cars. And I'm like, whoa, what is happening right now? And they put us against a fence, and they start like searching around the area all around. And mind you, I'm 16 years old, never been arrested before, never been really, I've been searched by police before, but never in this manner. It was very intense. They were in unmarked vehicles, one a big black van. And they put us against the fence. They start searching around, and they find a clip of weed about this small. So they're like, oh, cuff me and my friend Chris, put us in the cop car. And the most interesting and most difficult part about this story is directly across, when I'm getting in the cop car, is my grandparents' building where my dad grew up. And this sense of shame just hits me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I don't even care that I'm cuffed at this point. I'm thinking more about my parents finding out. And so we're on our way to the precinct, and Chris is kind of trying to keep me calm because I think he could tell that I was really just going through a lot of emotions. And so they take us to a precinct, and then they do this very uncomfortable search, which I was like, what is going on? Like, for this small amount of marijuana, I'm feeling like America's Most Wanted, because that was like kind of a show that was on in the 90s. So I'm like, this is really not what I visioned my day looking like. And then, of course, my parents found out. They're at the precinct. I see them. I'm like, Chris, oh my gosh, like I'm dead. They're gonna kill me for this. And I'm more worried about that than what's actually going on. And I didn't realize they were gonna take us from the precinct to Central Booking, which is downtown Brooklyn, actually a few blocks from where I live. And we get there, and it was one of the most uncomfortable feelings that I've ever had in my life. And so many thoughts were going through my mind. And my reality was just like, I went from being this innocent 16-year-old that really hasn't experienced any trauma per se like this, so now I'm like surrounded by adults, people that maybe were on drugs, possibly were locked up for a lot severe reason than a small piece of marijuana. That wasn't even me and my friends. And then, mind you, the cops were a little more aggressive because I had $300 on me. So they're like, yeah, where'd you get this from? And really questioning me about that. And I'm like, my parents gave it to me. Like I was on my way to go shopping right now. Like, school is starting in another week. It was exactly like a week left of summer. And, I'm in this huge cell. And I realized that I'm going to have to stay there for the night. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to survive this? There's a bathroom in there. Like, that's where you're expected to go use the bathroom if you need to. And one thing that I will never forget is my friend kind of taking the role of protecting me, because there was a scenario while we were in there where I feel like if my friend wasn't there, it could have gotten aggressive. And it was one of the scarier moments in my life. And you know, I'll never forget how he protected me in that moment and his poise. But the tricky thing about that is that, you know, I think that it says a lot about a certain environment that you could be in. Because when I was at Severian, while I was at Berkeley Carroll, I was with people that smoke weed, you know, and I was around people doing different things. And it was spaces where it was predominantly white during those times. And what tore my heart apart was the next morning when we go in, they actually make us like go into court for this and see a judge about something that's clearly going to just be dismissed. And I'll never forget like my parents being there, the shame that I felt. And then, you know, as I've gotten older, when I think about this, I think about the shame that they put so many young Black men and Hispanic men through, especially in the system, because that's all I saw while I was in that huge cell. And I just feel like, how was I 16, a teenager, a child, still kind of navigating what right and wrong is, you know, what direction in life I want to go. I was this really successful basketball player leading up to that. Um, and it's kind of like everything is just stripped from you in this 1 second, you know, one moment that, and it had a lot to do with where I was. It didn't have to do with the actual act of what went on. It had more to do about the neighborhood that I was in, the neighborhood that both my parents grew up in, that my grandfather every morning would sit on the bench that I looked at before getting in that cop car and feed pigeons all day and talk to everyone in the community. And here I am in this position where I know I'm not in the wrong, but I'm being treated like a criminal. And to know that so many young men and women have to deal with that, just it it added to this layer of being uncomfortable. And I'll even use the word awkward, which I feel is appropriate right now. And you know, I that feeling really has never left. And every altercation, every time, you know, I've had to deal with police officers, like that's what stands out, you know. And that judge just stands out to me because in a moment where I feel like I should have been guided more in what the repair could be instead of feeling that shame, you know, really tore me apart at that moment. And I just really feel that, especially during these times, is why I wanted to share this story, because a lot of our system needs to change. And it had a huge impact on the innocence that I had and having to really let go of that, because I saw in my face what the corruption and things that lie in a system that we're supposed to be able to trust. And it just, for certain groups of people, it's just so unfair. And I just really, you know, as I think back to that story, as much as I feel hurt is as much as I feel love for my friend Chris, though, because, you know, when I think about this story over and over, I understand why we've had a lifelong relationship. And every time we see each other, whether we haven't seen each other for years, we give each other the biggest hug, you know, and it's that moment that drew us a little closer together. But I think that this world should create so many more spaces for everyone to have those moments and it not to be in a moment of desperation. Thank you.
Wow, powerful, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Will.
That
Very
reminds me of on the ballot. You can see I've got behind me here vote in New Jersey. We have on the ballot finally legalizing marijuana here in this state. And I mean, that's not going to solve systemic racism, obviously, but I hope that that's going to pass and that's going to keep that reason, at least, for locking up young people completely needlessly. And if they do it right here, hopefully expunging their records for the people who've been locked up for that too, which is just, well, ridiculous in my view. But yeah, it's not on the ballot in New York yet, but I'm hoping Jersey, it'll go, and then it'll follow suit all around, because it's just crazy to me that you had that experience over a tiny little bit of marijuana.
Yeah. And a lot of people did at that during those times, and that's how a lot of people got caught up in the system. And I just think that, it's about time that they correct that. And so hopefully soon in New York as well.
Yeah. Hopefully one more step in finding some justice in this country. So yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your show? You guys have something coming up here on Saturday, right?
Yeah, we have something coming up on Saturday. You could follow us at Unreeling on Instagram. And Devin, he's been doing his thing at the Moss, becoming a very well-known storyteller. And I actually work at the school that his kids go to. And we always would talk in the mornings. I would greet him every day, and we had a bond because we're both Laker fans. So, this is my time to kind of shout out the Lakers for winning the championship for Devin. But, he spent time in LA growing up, and we were searching for something to do together that could be meaningful. And one thing that he felt we could collaborate on was storytelling. And we just kind of started Unreeling. And one of our missions with that too is to make sure that more people of color get involved in storytelling and it become more of a diverse group of people. And thank you for having such a diverse group tonight on this show, because I think that that's such an important piece to everything, because we all have different experiences, different perspectives. And that's one thing that me and Devin are really trying to push and promote and get people to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, because we have to share some of these stories to heal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
want to help plug your show here, because I've been lucky enough to watch one of them, and I think it was one of the most powerful and impactful hours of storytelling I've been able to sit through. So if anyone watching tonight wants to check them out, follow them on at Unreeling, I think. Is that it? Okay. And then you can see when they're going to do another show. It's absolutely worth your time.
Yeah, it's Saturday at 7:00. There's an Eventbrite link that we have on our Instagram, and it's all educators. It's an education theme, all women cast, and it's going to be really special. So I hope you could join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to echo what Grant said, and I will be watching on Saturday. Hope to see some of y'all there too. Thanks again, Jason, for sharing that story. Before we get to our last storyteller, I just want to quickly tell you a little bit more about our show. So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Awkward Teenage Years. We're on Twitter as well, although we don't really maintain it, to be honest with you. So find us on Instagram, probably is the best place, or Facebook. We're always looking for pitches for new stories for future shows. So you can email us your pitch if you have a story about your teenage years, awkwardteenageyears@gmail.com. That's any story in which you are the main character. We like to keep them 6 to 8 minutes approximately. Please email us if you have something and you'd like to be on the show sometime. You can also watch videos of any of our past shows on YouTube. Just search for Awkward Teenage Years and you should see them all pop up. This is our 11th show, so the other 10 are all there, and this one will be there after not too long. And if you really love this show tonight and somebody that you know wasn't able to see it, it'll be up here on Twitch, this same address, for the next 2 weeks before we put it up onto YouTube. All right, I think that is about it for my PSA about our show. It's time for your final storyteller of the night. This guy I've known from around the New York City storytelling scene for quite some time. I think this is the first time we've actually been able to be on a show together. And he's a storyteller based in Brooklyn. He's a Moth Story Slam winner. His work has been featured on the Risk live show and podcast. And I'm very excited to welcome Mr. David Hu.
Thank you. Thank you. Always had a hard time fitting in at school in the Bronx during the early 90s. It's predominantly Hispanic and Black, and I was the only Chinese kid there. Kids always made fun of me. Not because of the color of my skin, is the clothes I wore. Crew neck sweaters and beige corduroy pants from the Gap. At that time, all the kids were into like baggy ass jeans and oversized t-shirts because it got influenced by movies like Juice and Boys in the Hood. And I always felt like shit every day. And when I feel like shit, I always talk to my older sister, Debbie. Debbie's not just my sister, but she always gets me clothes from the Gap because she works there. So one afternoon I was like, Debbie, where can I find like really cool clothing for myself other than the Gap? Because that family discount is not doing me any justice. And she tells me about this place called the Unique Warehouse. It's in the Village. It's a department store that sells vintage clothing. And we went down there one Saturday afternoon. And I remember when I walked in, the place is just like covered in graffiti. It smells like bohemian body oil and burnt pretzels. And they're playing like hip hop music. And I see this Hispanic kid walking around looking mad dope with his baggy ass jeans, his polo crew neck sweatshirt, and his Air Force Ones. Homeboy was just like crushing it, especially with this like bleached out crew cut hairstyle from Supercuts. He looked like Eminem before we knew him as a real Slim Shady. And I'm just like staring at him like, wow, I want to be just like him. The next day at school, I'm walking through the halls with my new outfit from the Unique Warehouse. These light blue baggy ass jeans, my oversized white t-shirt that says Philly's Blunt across it, and my white on white Air Force One knockoffs from Chinatown, looking like a homeless astronaut. And this kid Jamal walks by me. He's like, hey, yo, that shit is mad ill. Where'd you get that? Like a deer in headlights. I just don't know what to say. And I'm like, the Village? He said, word. And he walks away. And I felt really good that day because no one has ever complimented me on my clothes. And I started going to the Unique Warehouse more often and spending all my money on clothes because it made me feel good about myself. And I loved the attention I was getting at school. And every time I go to the Unique Warehouse, I always see that Hispanic kid just looking mad dope wearing Nautica now. And I really want to talk to him, but I don't want to sound like a dumbass. I want to sound kind of intelligent. So I thought about Jamal and how he complimented me on my clothes. And I take a deep breath. I said, okay, here he goes. And I walk up to him. I'm like, hey, yo, that shit is mad ill. Where'd you get that? And he gives me this dirty look. I stole it. You got a fucking problem? And I'm like, word. And we became friends. His name is Josh, but everyone calls him Adobe. And Adobe introduces me to his friends. They're older than me, they dress really cool, and they're not in school anymore. And I'm like, if they don't have to be in school, why should I? And I started spending more time with Adobe and his friends. One afternoon, we're in the park, and Adobe rolls me up a cigarette, and he shoves them in my hands. Yo, smoke that shit. I'm like, yo, I got this. But deep inside, I don't got this. I never smoked a cigarette before, and I'm assuming you got blow into it. It's really wet and soggy in my mouth, and they're all laughing at me. I feel like an ass clown right now. And Adobe rolls up a new cigarette and says, yo, this is what you got to do. You got to inhale, you got to leave it in, and then you got to exhale. And I take his suggestion and I start coughing. I'm like, what is this? And he says, weed. I said, weed, word. And I kept on inhaling and exhaling. And I finally got a hang of it. And I was like, that shit is mad ill. And they all start laughing, give me high fives. I felt special that day. I felt so special that he invited me to go clubbing with them on Friday night. The only problem is I'm 14 years old and I don't know what to do. And Adobe reaches deep in his pocket and he pulls out a fake ID and it says Adobe 25, New York University. And that afternoon, I paid $5 for my first fake ID at a smoke shop. In the picture, my head looks like a dirty Q-tip. My eyes are bloodshot red. And I have this huge earring in my ear that looks like one of those shower rings on a curtain. And it says, Dave, 25, Harvard Business School. It's Friday night and I'm ready to go clubbing. And my mom and dad walks in my room and like, Dave, can we talk to you? I'm like, no, what do you want? Dave, we found out you're not going to school anymore. Coming home now with an attitude, and now you're smoking weed? It's because you're hanging out with that kid, what, Adobe? He's a bad influence on your life, and we don't want you to be around him again. I'm like, Mom and Dad, that's bullshit. Fuck all of you. And they have this like furious look in their face. And they're saying, Dave, you're grounded. Storm out of my room, and my sister walks in. And she's like, Dave, after tonight, I don't have a brother anymore. And guess what? If you ever want clothes on the Gap, you're going to have to pay full price like everyone else. I'm pissed off. I want to go out because if I don't show up at the club, Adobe and his boys are going to think I'm a chump and they're not going to hang out with me again. So what I do is it's midnight and everyone's asleep. And I take my sister's stuffed teddy bear and I shove it under the sheets of the bed to look like I'm sleeping. And I end up going clubbing. And for a 14-year-old, it was quite the culture shock to experience New York City nightlife for the first time. Bright lights, smoke machines, drug dealers dressed up like spacemen trying to sell me ecstasy and weed. My 14-year-old head is about to explode. And I walk outside and I see Adobe and his boys just smoking a cigarette. They said, yo, you want to go get a slice? I said, yeah. On the way to go get a slice, it's dark. It's kind of quiet. And we're all laughing, giggling. And his friend says, watch your back. And he pushes me. And I push him back. And then all of a sudden his other friend says, yo, watch your back. And he shoves me. And then I almost lose my balance. I shove him back. I said, what the fuck are you doing? And then I hear Adobe's voice in the background. Yo, chill. And I get hit in the back of the head. It literally felt like a softball just pegged me in the back of the head. And the pain just radiated through my body like pins and needles. And everything just like faded to black as I slowly fell to the ground. I immediately regained consciousness when I'm in the fetal position. Adrenaline is running through my body as they're punching, kicking me on the ground. I feel like a fighter against the ropes. And I'm trying to scream, but no words are coming out of my mouth. And it feels like a bad dream. But the reality is I'm going to die tonight. And all of a sudden I hear cop cars driving by and it's getting louder and louder. Woo, woo, woo. And I hear them scream, 5-0, 5-0, let's jet. And they take off running with $50 from my pocket. I take off running the opposite direction, the fastest as I can for the train. I'm sitting in the train and I just stare at my reflection in the window. I'm covered in like dirt. My clothes are ripped. And I just see like a kid that just got caught up in his own delusions. And I get back home that night. And the first thing I do is I turn on the lights in my bedroom and all I see is my sister's stuffed teddy bear sitting on my bed. And I turn around and my mom and dad are standing there. And then they just walk away. That happens to be the most scariest thing to happen to me tonight. The next day at breakfast, Mom and Dad didn't say a word to me. I pissed them off, but they set aside a box of bandages. Mom and Dad always had my back. I was just too stupid and selfish to realize it. Today, Unique Warehouse is an NYU bookstore, and that club is a high-end condo in Tribeca. And although I never got accepted to Harvard Business School, I did learn a really valuable lesson that evening that an MBA education would have never taught me. Fitting in is not about the clothing you wear, it's about being accepted for who you are. And that said, the family discounts at the Gap is such a hard bargain to beat. Thank you.
Well done.
I love that story. Such a rich description of the 90s New York scene too.
Definitely. Spot on 90s right there.
Yeah.
I gotta say, coming home to find a teddy bear waiting for you, that almost sounds like a mob warning almost.
It's almost, yeah.
If I walked in and saw a teddy bear sitting there waiting for me, I'd be like, oh no. It's
It reminds me that you know, the movie Eyes Wide Shut, when he comes home and the mask is on the pillow.
yes.
But for
That's a total Eyes Wide Shut.
yeah. Amazing story. Dave, is there anything you wanna plug, tell everybody about?
Not at this moment. I mean, if there's any shows I could pitch you, I'll be more than welcome to.
All right. Well, I mean, if you all love that story as much as I did, it is on the Risk podcast. I think that, what was that, like June or July or something like that? It was on the podcast.
I believe so.
Yeah.
So if you type in risk space healing, you'll find it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. So you can find it there. And Dave's been on the podcast another time too. That's just a great podcast to listen to in general if you love storytelling. So check it out. All right, folks. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of our storytellers, David, Grant, Jessica, Jason, and Anu. Had a great time being back here with you. We are planning to be back in November. It's certainly not going to be 3 months before we see you again. And I just want to leave you with one final word, and that is vote. Please vote. Please vote. All right. Good night.